Since you're new to H&R Block, we'll look at your returns from the last 3 years for any money your last guy might have missed, for free.
I could get money back from last year?
You could. We'll find any mistakes.
Could have really used that 2 years ago when I dated that mistake for 5 months.
Don't leave money on the table. Switch to H&R Block and get a free second look review. Second look is included at no additional cost with the purchase of tax preparation. Results vary. All tax situations are different. Fees apply if you have us file an amended return.
So good, so good, so good.
Just in and so good. Thousands of spring finds up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. And that means thousands of fresh reasons to rack.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Vince, Calvin Klein, Rag & Bone?
Obsessed. Why do we rack? For the hottest deals.
Save on Madewell, Kate Spade New York, Sam Edelman, Joe's, and more. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and today we are reacting to Jed York and head coach Kyle Shanahan's press conferences at the NFL owners meetings out there today. Going to get into some Jake Brendel conversation. Will the Niners draft a center, or are they going to turn back to Old Faithful? Maybe not in a good way, Jake Brendel in 2025, and going to get into Brock Purdy's contract situation. We have some updates for you, and more importantly, I don't understand why Niner fans are up in arms with the departure of Dre Greenlaw, but we do have to address how the Niners went about their negotiations with the former linebacker out there in San Francisco. All that coming up next right here on 49ers Access. Okay, let's talk about the NFL owners meetings in 2025. There really is only one big storyline kind of circling the San Francisco 49ers currently, and that is Brock Purdy's contract. When will it happen? How much will he get? But there was a lot more news happening. We'll get to Brock Purdy in a hot second, but I want to address what Kyle Shanahan said about the kicking position. Now, it may not be the most controversial position, may not even be the most important position, but the kicker position has been under some hot water since the San Francisco 49ers drafted Jake Moody in the third round of the 2023 NFL Draft. At the time, it felt like a luxury. Get your kicker. It was a risk for sure. It can be boom or bust for you. You can really never know how kickers are going to pan out. He is the current third highest drafted kicker since 2004, and it really has been a disaster thus far for San Francisco. After a rocky rookie season, Jake comes out last year and doesn't look too bad. The team overwhelmingly played pretty poorly throughout the year, but Moody wasn't terrible to begin. Then he hurt his ankle and then was abysmal down the stretch of the season. People were calling for his job, saying, how is he still here? Why is he on the team? You watch people like Anders Carlson and Matthew Wright go out there and, although have their own struggles, be more consistent than Jake Moody in his absence. But Jake Moody's back in 2025, but we did get some good news. For all of you out there who are saying, get Jake Moody off my team, he's a bust, don't want him here anymore, which I can't really fault you for that, but Kyle Shanahan said today the plan is to bring in a veteran kicker to have a competition with Jake Moody during the offseason, training camp, and the preseason, and he really let the door open to Jake Moody not being this team's kicker in 2025. Now, I do think they want Moody to be the kicker when you invest a third-round pick into a kicker, which really is never a smart move to do. You want that guy to pan out for your own sake, right? And I think they want Jake to keep the job. They don't want whoever they sign or draft or sign as a UDFA in this month's draft. They don't want that person to beat Moody out. However, with how inconsistent Moody has been, you already fired Brian Schneider, who was a big reason as to why Moody got drafted in that third round in 2023. You have Brant Boyer taking over special teams. Moody really doesn't have a connection to anybody in that group thus far. Tabor Pepper's also gone, so Moody really doesn't seem to be, a lock outside of his performance. On top of that, there is some relationship stuff I think that could lead to his departure as well. But the quote I want to point out is, it was a big one, but there was one kind of chunk of it I think is really important here for Jake Moody's future in San Francisco, and it reads this from Kyle Shanahan. And when your job's on the line, doing something, going against someone who's talented, you do feel that pressure. And I do believe if he can overcome that being Jake Moody, and beat out a capable guy, that'll show us he's ready for the season. Now, I'm not sure if that means it's based on the injury Jake had last year, but he came back and he didn't look healthy, so maybe there is some lingering ankle problems, but the assumption is, after having so much time to recover, Jake Moody's healthy, but this really points to they are going to have a serious kicking competition on special teams, whoever they bring in. Maybe it's Nick Folk, or not Nick Folk, excuse me. I think he got cut by the Patriots, but anyways, whether it's a UDFA, they sign somebody, they apparently talked to the kid from Miami, Andres Borregales, maybe they sign him as a UDFA this offseason, whoever it is, they are very open to that being a competition, not just to see and kind of for show. They believe that Jake Moody may not be their kicker in 2025, and I think it's a good thing. You're going into year 3 of Jake Moody. 1 year left after this season on his contract. It's time to kind of put up or shut up. So that is a small tidbit of information when it comes to those out there who say, I don't want Jake Moody on my team in 2025. You may get your wish. You may really get what you've been looking for, because San Francisco seems pretty upfront and adamant that they're going to bring in somebody else, and not just for show, a serious competitor to either push Jake or take Jake's job in 2025. Let's go to another Jake. Not Jake Moody, not Jacob Cowing, but Jake Brendel. The Niners have many, I don't want to say controversial, but many pivot points that I think need to be tweaked and need to be refined, and this, that, and the other. Center is a big part of that on the offensive line. I do think that the Niners are going to go into 2025 with Jake Brendel as their starting center. We talked last night during our first mock draft that there really isn't a center prospect I'd feel comfortable replacing Brendel with, simply because San Francisco doesn't usually play rookie centers. You have Matt Hennessy. Maybe you like Drake Nugent, who was signed last year as a UDFA out of Michigan. And Kyle just never plays rookies, and this draft class is really not that great when it comes to these center prospects. So I think Jake Brendel's a lock to make the roster under contract for the next 3 years, but a lot of people, myself, I'm sure you out there and others, are kind of screaming from the mountaintops like Jake Brendel, his job at least needs to come into question, and I'm hoping they can take that competition they're going to have at kicker and translate that to center, because Jake Brendel is a 33-year-old center. He's an older guy, was a late bloomer in the NFL, played with Chris Forrester in Miami, didn't play there at all very much, brought over to San Francisco, backed up Alex Mack for a year, then took his job, right? So I get there is connections with Chris Forrester and Jake Brendel. However, Kyle Shanahan addressed Jake Brendel in one of the more oddly positive ways today at the ownership meetings. Take a listen here.
Assess Jake Brendel's play last year.
I thought Jake played well. When you study centers throughout the league and things like that, and you watch all these guys, I think Jake's up there when it comes to his pass protection. A lot of these guys get mismatched against the head of noses and some of the D tackles they got to go against. I think Jake does protection as good as anyone in this league, and I think he's always been a very good run player for us too.
Will Hennessy factor in at all? Will there be any sort of competition at that spot?
I don't really look at it going in as Jake's competing. I think Jake's played at a pretty high level. I think our whole line has. It's going to be hard losing Banks. It's really hard losing Jalen Moore, who's been a great swing tackle, who's has got to play a lot with Trent being down half of last year. So those are the things that we got to really look to replace. And getting Hennessy there at the end of the year, we've always loved him at center. He's been a very good guard. We do have an open spot with some open competition there, but we'll see how all that plans out. That, going into this season, going into OTAs, going into training camp, I do feel there will be as much competition on our team for starting spots as there has been in a while, especially on defense. But we kind of want to create that everywhere. We haven't had that for a while. We've gone into drafts these last few years, not as much last year, but especially the 2 years prior, to where you look at our board and it's like, man, we don't really have to find a starter anywhere. You got to find depth, because quickly there a starter with an injury. I remember going into 3 years ago and felt the only starting position we could find was a kicker, because we were so solidified. And it really isn't that way this year. So we're going to go into this draft, hopefully add 11 people. We'll see how that plans out, add them into our OTAs, and hopefully we'll have some really good competition come training camp.
So left guard would be Zakel, Barch, and maybe Hennessy, all kind of looking in at that.
There's a lot to take away there from what Kyle Shanahan said, but I want to kind of backtrack to the beginning, because when he was kind of pressed, maybe pressed isn't the right word to use, but when he was asked about is there going to be a competition at center, he pushed back immediately of, I didn't really think of it that way. We really have an open guard position where there'll be a competition there. If that is not an open answer and a very clear, direct answer to nope, not going to be a competition at center. It's Jake Brendel's job. We think he's played pretty well, which it's a very mixed bag, and at times that bag is full of fake gold chocolates, and other times it's full of just straight up crap. Jake Brendel is one of the more polarizing players on this team. Yes, to Kyle Shanahan's credit, Jake Brendel is an overwhelmingly good run blocker. However, go back to last year, I think a lot of the struggles they had were on the interior offensive line. Pooney played well, kind of hit the wall later in the year, but that's expected to happen for any rookie. But center and left guard were a massive problem for this team. And so when you lose Aaron Banks, which I think is actually not that big of a deal, Banks was terrible last year. And we all talk about Brock Purdy in a way, which Bobo, Strawberry Reacts, Tommy Huxley, and many more in the YouTube chat talking about Purdy as we speak. People call Brock a system quarterback and kind of use he has to have a great team around him to play well. A lot of that can be translated to the offensive line, where if your center is playing next to a bad left guard, that center is going to play worse, right? Now, it doesn't equal being terrible, as Jake Brendel was last year, where guys like Creed Humphrey and Jason Kelsey can survive and play really well next to a below-average left guard or right guard, where Jake Brendel isn't those top-tier, top-echelon centers where he can't survive and can't play great, where I think Jake Brendel struggled a lot due to Aaron Banks' inconsistencies, but also will concede Jake Brendel had a 71 run blocking grade last year, which was top 15, top 12 among centers. So kudos to you, Kyle. You're right in that area. Jake Brendel was a pass blocker and a pass protector, and doing the center position, the things that takes to be a center, calling out protections, is one of the worst in football. You can't ignore that. You can't erase that. So I get Kyle being up front in this wide zone scheme they run, where he likes Jake Brendel as a run blocker, and Kyle will always lean that way rather than saying he wants an excellent pass protector. Of course, you want both, but Kyle will rather have you be a great run blocker and an average pass protector, hence Mike McGlinchey, hence Colt McKivitz. However, when you're seeing your center on the ground, ass up, with his face turned around to the quarterback oh God, run, Brock, run, it's not a great thing. And too many times in pass protection, Jake Brendel was simply that. Head turned around, overmatched, getting beat by bigger defensive tackles, which I get it. Jake Brendel isn't this biggest center. He's not the strongest center. He's a average size center that can do some good things for you, but has a clear cut massive weakness, that being pass protection. And even go back 2 years ago in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs, while yes, Brock Purdy is in charge of, or at least has a hand in calling out protections, Jake Brendel in the center position in Kyle Shanahan's offense has been the almost sole responsible party when it comes to calling out protections, hence why Kyle paid up for Weston Richburg, hence why Kyle went and got Alex Mack. There's a reason as to why Kyle usually doesn't want a rookie center, because veterans understand defenses more. Brendel was a massive reason as to why San Francisco struggled last year. And even in that Super Bowl, calling out protections, sliding protections over, Brendel is putting protections the opposite way. He's tricked more often than not. And so to hear Kyle Shanahan kind of push back and say, not going to be a competition, it's head-scratching. Now, I think Brendel belongs in the room. I just don't know if that's as a starter. Now, he doesn't give you guard center versatility. He's a straight center. And to hear Kyle talk about, we like Matt Hennessy, we liked him in Atlanta, but kind of lean more towards we like him at guard, leads me to believe that they're probably going to draft a guard as well. They want to have Zakelj. They want to have Burford, who I think will probably become this team's backup left tackle behind Trent Williams next year, or maybe be a backup left guard if Barch doesn't retain that job or if he doesn't win that job. But it seemed like Kyle was almost closing the door on any competition to have Jake Brendel be in, which is a mind-boggling, head-scratching decision. Like, why would you not want to have a competition if you're so open to Jake Moody competing with some random Joe Blow, on the scrap heap, or a veteran guy who's been around for 10 plus years, and you're open to having an entire defensive competition on your trenches, which makes sense outside of Nick Bosa? Why would you not be open to everybody maybe outside of McKivitz and Pooney and Trent Williams, who have shown to be either really good or at least somewhat competent on the offensive line? It's okay to go into camp saying, look, you're the leader in the camp, you are the leader in the clubhouse for that job, but we're open to Matt Hennessy having a phenomenal preseason, or Nick Zakelj, or whoever else you bring in, or whoever else you want to move around, just being better than you. Like, that's okay to do at almost every single position. You're going to have one at the third cornerback spot this year between Trey Brown, Darrell Luter Jr., and probably a draft pick. You're going to have one at your safety position. You're going to have one, probably at your backup tight end position. You're going to have one in the running back room. Why is center not involved in that conversation, not included in what should be a roster that has a lot of top-end talent, but a lot of players played terrible last year? That includes Jake Brendel. Your job should not be safe when it comes to finding maybe a younger, cheaper, and maybe a better replacement down the road, which, why did you sign Matt Hennessy if you want him to play guard? That doesn't make sense. I get he has versatility. You also have Nick Zakelj, who I don't love very much, but he can play center and guard. You have Drake Nugent. I get it, Kyle sometimes one-track minded, doesn't want to answer questions, and so he won't say much. But to hear Kyle just openly tell the media, like, I didn't think of it that way. Jake's not going to be in a competition, but guard will have one of those. I don't want to call a quarterback dumb, but man, like, Jake Brendel's making no money, under contract for 3 years, mind you, but like, you can find replacements. This team has, and to Bobo's point here, or the comment in the YouTube chat, you're stuck with Jake Brendel because you have to pay Brock Purdy. No, you're not. This team has $35 million in cap space. They're going to redo George Kittle's deal. And Brock Purdy's contract, although he'll have a higher cap hit because of him being the lowest paid starting quarterback in football, Jake Brendel has no domino effect on Brock Purdy's contract at all. You could have cut Jake Brendel as easily as you cut Leonard Floyd. You could have cut Jake Brendel and moved on as easily as you moved on from Malik Collins and didn't bring back Ward and Ufunga and Greenlaw, which you can debate good and bad in all those moves. I'm okay with Brendel being here. And I didn't think there really was a center. Like, Drew Dalman was a big name. I didn't love him. And I think he has a lot of issues similar to Jake Brendel, although Dalman is a better player overall. That said, it's okay to have just cheaper competition in the room. And the Niners don't even want to have that. And that's the mind-boggling part. Where it's not the fact that, you didn't sign a top guy. It's that you don't even feel open to the idea of the guy that played center in Atlanta 2 or 3 years ago even sniffing the job. Like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense whatsoever. So the way they're going about things, I know they feel confident in the offensive line. You like Trent Williams, although he's older. He's injury prone at this point in his career, which you got to get a backup left tackle. Maybe that's a free agent signing. Maybe that's, just sliding Burford over. Maybe it's a draft pick. Who knows? But I get you like Pooney, like McKivitz, but you have to insulate yourself, I think, on the interior more than the tackle position. But they have some work to do, and with all the things they gutted in free agency, they didn't gut the offensive line whatsoever. So I don't love the answer. I don't mind Brendel starting again, but I would at least be open to the idea of some competition. Now, I think if you have Jake Brendel, you can't walk into next year with a Ben Barch, who I do like a lot, but has injury history, like a lot of injury history. And you have Burford, who got hurt last year as well. Like, you cannot walk into next year with a, really no answer at left guard. I get you have Pooney at right guard, you like McKivitz, you like Trent, but
Acura's all-new ADX, a compact SUV that isn't just built for one thing, it's precision crafted for everything. To escape the grind with available all-wheel drive. To go with your flow with available Google built-in.
Hey Google, turn it up.
Okay, turning up the volume. And crafted to be heard with an available Bang & Olufsen premium sound system. The all-new Acura ADX, crafted to match your energy. Acura, precision crafted performance.
Take your vibes and go.
Google is a trademark of Google LLC.
Aaron Banks and Brendel were black holes for you. And if you're going to play Brendel at center, okay, I don't love that, but okay, you got to find a left guard. Whether it's Jonas Savannah from Arizona, whether it's Dylan Fairchild from Georgia, who we picked yesterday in our first mock draft, you got to find somebody. Whether it is Matt Hennessy, you have to have an upgrade there from Aaron Banks. I don't care what Kyle says about Aaron Banks. He was atrocious last year. You have Luke Farrell as your backup tight end. Your blocking should be better than Eric Sauber, which is great, but the job is far from done on your offensive line. And I think Jake Brendel in a backup or having another guard opposite him or next to him would be great. You can almost not erase Brendel's weaknesses, but certainly lift him up. There's a reason why the minute Brendel started playing poorly was when Banks started playing poorly. They're very tied together, and if you don't find improved left guard play, you're going to have the exact same problems you had last year. I don't love Brendel, I'm not tied to him, but if they're going to have him on the team, you better get a better left guard next year. I don't know who it is. Maybe it is Ben Barch. You got to have improved left guard play, because Jake Brendel is going to be one of the biggest reasons as to why this team falters, outside of calling out protections, outside of being, although a rather competent run blocker, Brock Purdy is going to have running for his life a lot of the time next year, simply based on, like, the Rams. Take the Rams, for example, and even the Cardinals just signed Calais Campbell. They're getting nose tackles. The Rams are probably going to draft the DT somewhere. That defensive line is based on bigger dudes that got some power. What can Jake Brendel not hold up against? Bigger dudes that got some power. And Kyle openly admits that. And if you know that, then help your brother out at the offensive line, which ultimately helps your entire team out. So I don't love the answer from Kyle, but overwhelmingly, if that's going to be what you're doing, you got to improve your left guard, because my goodness, if you don't, you're going to be in the exact same spot next year, like, all this money we saved was for what? And I get it, there really isn't somebody there you like, but you can't just be closed-minded. I think that's the bigger issue. Being closed-minded to the idea of competition for a player that was one of the worst centers in football as a pass blocker. But I do think if you get a better left guard, I think you will see an improvement from Jake Brendel. I don't trust it. And that is a massive remains to be seen walking into the draft in 23 days. Only 23 days. Mick says, trust Lynch, Kyle, and Jed's plan. The plan is risky, and I'm open to trusting it. I do believe in them, but it doesn't mean you can't criticize the plan along the way. Joseph Ehrenberg says here, Brendel's going to be a center if Hennessy or Nugent beats him out. Yeah, I think that's a pretty clear answer. I've been telling you guys that for months, almost the entirety of the year. Brendel was terrible, but he'll be back in 2025, likely as this team's starting center. See, we have here also in the YouTube comments, Niner Goat 16, kind of going back to the whole calling out protections conversation regarding Jake Brendel, about how Brendel was pretty bad at it last year, calling out the opposite protections a lot of the time, which kind of ruined some plays. They say, why can't Brock call protections? $50+ million a year, he should be able to. This is not a knock on Brock Purdy. And yes, Brock Purdy does have responsibility, although for most offenses, the center is the one that calls out protections. He slides things over. Brock can certainly tweak things and override things, but you want to have that trust. I think Brock would tell you he trusts Jake Brendel. At times I wouldn't. But you got to trust your guy to do his job. And so if Jake's moving things over, you trust that's the right answer at times. I can't go into a play-by-play with you. Obviously, only Kyle and Jake and Brock probably could, and Chris Forrester as well, and the OCs out there, Kubiak and company. And that said, it's not that Brock doesn't do this, but Jimmy had Richburg. Jimmy had Alex Mack. Trey had Alex Mack. Even in Atlanta, while Matt Ryan was a more accomplished player than Purdy and Jimmy, still was a reliance on the center position. You think that Jalen Hurts is overriding Jason Kelce? Now, look, I get it. Jason Kelce and Jake Brendel are very different people, players, and clearly one's probably a Hall of Famer. One's not going to be close to it whatsoever. But I do think that you have to have, it's not as simple as Jake, don't call them, Brock, get in there and call them. There's responsibilities involved that are in nuances we have no idea about, but it's not as simple as, you're getting paid a lot of money, you do it, right? It's not as simple as that. I know maybe it should be. I don't disagree with that, but I think you would look at the NFL and the entire landscape overwhelmingly. Most centers are probably calling out protections, and quarterbacks are making tweaks here and there, but Kyle has always been a coach that said centers call out protections. You're in charge of that stuff, whether it has been, Richburg, Mack, Brendel, and others in the room. So I get it, but I don't think that really is a knock on Purdy, nor do I think it is, I guess you can say, a job Purdy is probably going to get the reins to. Not because there's no trust, because that really isn't what they want the quarterback to be doing on any given play. But great question, great comment. I'm sure many people feel the exact same way about it. Joseph says here, because Brock can't see over the offensive line, so how is he going to see protection? He needs, he's too baby boy short. This going back to Brock's conversation on some podcast about not seeing the play 60 or 40% of the time, whatever it was. I don't think that's a problem for Brock, but it's a pretty funny comment. And I think, Brock's stature, while I know you're kind of joking here, it's a lot of people overblew that about, your Brock can't see, he's too short. It's okay, is it not working? Brock looks pretty darn good for most quarterbacks in the NFL. But if you don't like Jake Brendel, if you don't like Jake Moody, I'll tell you one thing you may like, and that is SeatGeek and saving yourself some money. If you go to SeatGeek.com and you find your tickets, whether it's for MLB, which is just now starting and in full swing currently, the Giants are 3-1, beat the Astros last night, feeling pretty good in the Bay as of right now, although the Dodgers are undefeated, which is terrible for the Giants. But if you want to go to a baseball game, want to go to an NBA playoff game, or you want to get ahead and buy some concert tickets this year, go to SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase by using our promo code 49ers Access, 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com. Okay, I want to address one of the more confusing, perplexing things I've seen in recent weeks. Now, I was gone for a week in Japan. It was incredible, by the way. On my belated honeymoon. It was awesome. That said, I came back to, I had my phone service out there and everything, and I was kind of keeping up on things. Kyle Juszczyk came back. Jordan Mason got traded, which I like both those moves for San Francisco. Certainly called Jordan Mason getting traded, so a pat on my back. That said, I left and people were kind of like starting to come back from the whole Dre Greenlaw not being here. Oh, it sucks. You had your goodbyes, but you're kind of getting over it. I came back to people being like, I can't believe Dre Greenlaw's gone. I'm irate. I'm frustrated. And a lot of it stemmed from what we learned. I don't know who the reporter was, so excuse me and forgive me for that. But we learned that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch flew to Texas to have like one final last-ditch effort to hopefully bring back and re-sign Dre Greenlaw before he went out to Denver and signed that new deal that he did with the Broncos. And apparently, according to the reports, they even outbid and raised their offer higher than the Denver Broncos offer, which Greenlaw did sign, which we don't know if that was higher guarantees, if that was a higher numerical value for a one-year contract. We have no idea, but from the reporting, the Niners were going to give more money to Dre Greenlaw in some capacity. And a lot of people, for whatever reason, saw that and were like, you got outbid and you flew to Texas? Kyle and John did? How dare you do that? This is a terrible look. I can't believe you did this. And my first reaction was, huh? Why are we mad? Why is this frustrating to anybody? Why is this the sticking point of like, oh, the Niners are bad at free agency? And it's like, wait, are we watching the same thing? No, I was gone for a week, but like nothing catastrophic has changed from what I can tell. A lot of people saw this as the Niners like not pursuing or not taking Greenlaw seriously as a free agent until somebody else wanted him. It's like in high school or middle school where, you and your friends are hanging out. You tell them you like this girl or you like this boy, and all of a sudden next week your friend starts liking that person too. And you're like, what the heck? Where did this come from? You're breaking bro code, you're breaking girl code, and you're like, because the other person's jealous. They want what you have. They're in this like awkward, weird competition with you, and you're like, I'm just in young love. This is not a competition at all. But people kind of viewed it that way of like the Niners didn't take Dre Greenlaw seriously until the Broncos wanted him. And it was head-scratching to hear that was the response. It was confusing to think that that was the takeaway from the Dre Greenlaw sweepstakes, if you will. And I think you can easily push back on this because I don't think it's fair to say the Niners, quote-unquote, disrespected Dre Greenlaw in any way during free agency. I don't think it's fair to say they didn't care about or take Dre Greenlaw seriously only until the Broncos did. Only until he hit the open market. Now, again, very clear indications. They wanted Dre Greenlaw back from the beginning. Very clear indications that they tried for months to bring back Dre Greenlaw. They wanted to re-sign him. John Lynch said it multiple times in press conferences. Kyle Shanahan said it multiple times in press conferences. They made offers to him later in the year, even after shutting him down, but Greenlaw wanted to test the open market. He wanted to go out there and see what he was worth, which makes sense for him. It also makes sense for San Francisco to try to avoid that. Get him on a cheaper deal. We have no idea exactly what San Francisco offered him during the season, but I'm sure it wasn't what he was going to get on the open market. Hence why he was like, I'll go test it out, see what I can get. And he got a pretty big bag for a player coming off a really serious injury. But let me ask you this. We know that they tried to sign him during the year. We know that, according to Matt Barros, Robert Saleh was on the phone every day before free agency and after the season trying to convince Greenlaw to come back. We want you back, Dre. I'm back. One more year. One last ride. All these things were part of the conversation. That feels like a team that wants a player back. Now, money makes things tricky and money complicates things for sure, but everything points to San Francisco doing what they can or could to retain Dre Greenlaw. And if you want to know how serious they were to bring back Dre Greenlaw, when is the last time you heard of John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan flying to a free agent's home together to make one last pitch, one last desperate ditch effort to re-sign somebody? I don't remember since 2017 when both those guys took over in San Francisco. I can't think of a single time during free agency they flew to somebody's house. Now, they had meetings with Tom Brady. I don't know where those were. That could have been over Zoom. It could have been in person. I don't remember. But I cannot think of another time where this regime flew to someone's house to give them a new contract, outbid the team that Greenlaw eventually signed with, and then in return, the response is, I can't believe you did this to Dre Greenlaw. Disrespectful. And it's like, huh? Huh? Whoa. Like, it's just kind of baffling. Like, I don't know how, like, in life, 1 + 1 always equals 2. This is one of those situations where 1 + 1 somehow found its way to equal 3. And it's like in my mind, in the last 5 years, the last half decade or so, the only time I can think of Kyle and John being in person, interviewing players, meeting with people, was at the Combine in 2021 when they picked Trey Lance. That's the only time. Like they don't do the whole, yeah, we're going to go to your house, have a meeting, meet your family, meet your parents, like meet your agent. All this stuff is done via Zoom. All this stuff, done, via, through agents. So, like, you can tell there was a very serious, I guess you can say, agenda to go out there and try to bring back Dre Greenlaw, but that has been met with, they didn't take him seriously. Like, I think Kyle would do that for Christian McCaffrey. I think Kyle would do that for Trent Williams. I think Kyle would probably do it for Brandon Ayuk. I mean, my goodness, Bobo says here, Kyle would have flown to Brandon Ayuk's house. So what? I mean, Kyle ran upstairs to advocate to John to not trade Brandon Ayuk. Now, you can debate that's a good move or not, but it's more about Kyle took Ayuk seriously. Kyle would take Trent, and Kyle would take Brock Purdy, and Kyle would take Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, all those things seriously. Like, those people are on the team. Greenlaw was a free agent. Like, those guys are in-house. They're going to have him. Like, Greenlaw was gone. And they were like, oh my God, panic. Let's go to Texas. That to me shows me there was a little emotion tied there. They wanted to bring him back, and it was not simply just, oh, Denver likes him now, let's go. This was, no, we do care about Dre. We tried to bring Dre back, learned he's not going to come back, and let's try one last time to hopefully bring him back. And it also, you can just tell by the reporting that Greenlaw wanted to be his own man. His father told Greenlaw, the advice Dre Greenlaw's father gave him was, do you want to be Scottie Pippen or do you want to be MJ? It's okay to admit that the San Francisco 49ers, for all their greatness, for all the good things they've done, could not give Dre Greenlaw what he wanted. They had the money in place. He likes the culture. He was a fit. But ultimately, you want to be your own guy. He's going to be entering his late 20s, coming off a pretty serious injury. One, he wanted the bag, and two, he doesn't have much more time to prove he can be a number one linebacker and be the core number one leader of a defense. Now was the time for Dre to leave. Now was the time for him to leave, go out on his own, and hopefully make his own way. And that's good for Dre. And I think it's okay for San Francisco. It's okay to say goodbye to a player that you don't know what the future holds for when it comes to injuries. Okay to have a hard line on money. It's okay for that kind of stuff. And I think that losing Dre Greenlaw is not going to kill this team. Yes, this linebacker class isn't the best. I don't think you draft one in the first 3 rounds, but you like D. Winters, you like Bethune, albeit they didn't play great last year. You're probably going to draft somebody else, and I think they're going to be okay. Now, is that going to be good? I don't know. They could be bad next year. Are they going to feel the loss of Dre Greenlaw? Certainly. Who wouldn't? But Greenlaw played 34 snaps last year. I get it wasn't impactful 34 snaps, but he played a half and then 4 snaps in one game. It's not like he was an impact player whatsoever last season, which I want him to be. I want Greenlaw to be awesome. It sucks losing him, but you could argue San Francisco, based on last year's team, not 2 years ago, not 3 years ago, but last year's team, are going to benefit from having D. Winters, a draft pick, and somebody else, and not giving Greenlaw big money, knowing that there is a massive risk when it comes to injury, which I think is a big drawback. Now, I hope Greenlaw just crushes it with Hufanga and DJ Jones out there in Denver, but, I don't really understand why the way San Francisco handled Dre Greenlaw was like a big talking point and a big kind of contentious point for fans. I get it. You're emotionally tied to him. So am I. I have his jersey. I love Dre Greenlaw. I was like crying when he lost or when he tore his Achilles. I was like, oh my God, like this is terrible, but I'm good. I think it's okay to lose players like this. They didn't do that for Ward. They didn't do it for Hufanga. They didn't do it for Eric Armstead. They didn't do it for many other players that were free agents. They went out of their way to fly to Texas, a 5.5-hour flight from California to Texas to bring him back. That to me makes a pretty serious indication they wanted to bring him back in a big way. But if you want to do me a big favor, go down below in the description and click that link to get yourself a can of goat fuel. Whether you like coffee, you want an energy drink, or you just want to feel like Jerry Rice himself, the GOAT. Click that link down below and you can save yourself 10% off your purchase, and you can help the show out as well. I'm not someone that likes energy drinks. I don't like Monster. I don't like Rockstar. The Starbucks ones are disgusting. They gave me a medical condition. That's how bad they are. But Goat Fuel, it's delicious, it's tasty, and it honestly gives you a kick in the butt to pick you up during the day. You can not have coffee anymore and drink some Goat Fuel instead. I love it, and I know you will too. So click that link down below, and let's all get goated. Okay. All the comments on YouTube are Brock Purdy conversation, and I want to finally get into it here. So everybody listen up. We're talking about Brock Purdy. You can now all chime in, and we can all have this conversation live and virtually through the YouTube. But let's talk about Brock Purdy, because there was 3 interesting quotes that came out to me at the NFL owners meetings today and during the last few days or so. The first one was from Jed York, the NFL or the Niners owner. And where things stand for Brock Purdy in San Francisco, it's not at an impasse. It's just really, really quiet. And we're kind of in that dead period in between free agency and the draft where people are on vacation. They're kind of finishing out their rosters, signing depth guys. Kind of the scouts are in the boardroom, in the draft rooms, kind of getting things in order. They're setting up top 30 visits. Like nothing is really publicized for fans, and so It feels quiet, it feels boring, but the owners' meeting is a good place to get answers from people that actually matter. There's agents there, there's owners there, there's Roger Goodell's there, Kyle Shanahan was there, and there's plenty of media at the place as well. But Jed York, he was asked about negotiations with Brock Purdy. And funny enough, when they asked him, where are negotiations, how are they, Jed York responded with this, and I quote here, "I don't negotiate contracts, but any conversations I've had with Brock personally have been great. I feel good. And when he's ready, we'll sit down and finish it. It shouldn't be that hard to do." The last sentence, great sign. It shouldn't be that hard to do. That's awesome. That, to me, at least from Jed York's own words, makes me feel like that we're not going to be in this tumultuous, drama-filled offseason. Okay, we can breathe somewhat. But then you back up like one sentence and you're like, oh my God, this could be a disaster once again for San Francisco. Because he says, when he's ready, we'll sit down and finish it. When Purdy's ready? When Brock Purdy's ready to sit down, that's the kind of what we're waiting on here? You don't think Brock Purdy wants to get a deal done? You don't think Brock Purdy and his agent want to figure things out? They're not waiting on another quarterback to get paid. The only quarterback, maybe there's two that get moved, is Aaron Rodgers, who has there is going to be no way Aaron Rodgers' contract reflects or impacts Brock Purdy's next deal whatsoever. Kirk Cousins, if he gets moved from Atlanta, maybe to Cleveland, back with Kevin Stefanski, that's not going to impact Brock Purdy at all either. There's no other quarterback that is going to change Brock Purdy's future or the money he gets. Josh Allen already got paid. Whatever Lamar gets will be much more than Brock Purdy gets. We know this. And Lamar's already getting paid big money. He just wants a renegotiated contract. So I don't love the idea of no, this is on Brock. When Brock's ready, we'll sit down. Now, he didn't say it like I'm saying it. They're kind of condescending, when Brock's ready. But just saying that on paper, it comes across pretty really? When Brock's ready, we'll have the conversation. When Brock's ready? No. I think Brock is ready now. Maybe Brock's on vacation, but he's doing podcasts, so he can't negotiate a contract? Wait a minute here. The idea that when Brock's ready to me seems so far-fetched. I'm pretty sure Brock Purdy's ready to go and is ready and willing to sign that contract if you give him the right dollar amount. Now, of course, negotiations happen, but I think that sentence, that group of words, when Brock is ready, we'll sit down and finish things. I think it's a good indication as to where things are at when it comes to the stages of the negotiating kind of process. We learned that Brock's agent was in Indianapolis at the Combine, that he met with John Lynch. Now, who knows what exactly was happening there, but we went from they're talking, they're negotiating, they're having good talks, things could get done relatively quickly. Now, we all assumed that meant maybe pre-free agency or shortly after free agency, pre-draft process, but hearing Jed say that and hearing Adam Schefter and Rappaport come out and say, look, nothing's close, no way they're close, and for Jed to kind of put this on Brock and his agent to a certain degree, I think it tells you that take your seatbelt, buckle up, click it in, and hold on for dear life, because we could be in for another long negotiation with Brock Purdy now. That leads to kind of more thoughts of I know how last year went with Brandon Ayuk, and it didn't go great. They regret that contract, and they have been for the last year. They've been telling us, we hated it, we lost it, this is terrible. You did Trent's deal, you did CMC's deal, you had Nick Bosa. We've learned what the holding out process looks like in San Francisco and how much it impacts the player and the team at the same time. So hearing that, although it doesn't equal holding out for Brock Purdy, it does really make me feel like, wow. We're going to be in for a long offseason once again, which they only have one deal to do. Like, they can redo George Kittle's deal, they can redo Fred Warner's deal, but they really only have one contract to get done. And I know it's a quarterback and it's tough at times, but like, for them to not be proactive, for them to kind of be like, oh, it's on Brock, like it's not a big deal, but like this, taking in all of the context the last couple of years or so, it's like, I don't like that. I don't want that. Get this done, please. For my sake. And look, it'll get done, but that process can be grueling. It can be long. It can have an impact on the player. There's emotional stuff that goes into it. There's family stuff. And I think Brock is prepared for that, and his agent is, but you just never know how players handle money and this, that, and the other. We have no idea what Brock actually wants. Peter Schrager today said Brock's not going to get $55 million per year. Who knows? But a lot of the Jed York talk of, the what's on Brock when he's ready leads to the question of, well, could Brock Purdy hold out? Could Brock Purdy not play for a chunk of games in San Francisco? Would he not come to OTAs? Would he not come to training camp? And how does it impact the team and the player? And Kyle Shanahan was asked about the potential of Brock Purdy holding out, and here it is at the NFL owners meeting today.
I hope not, and I know Brock doesn't want to do that. We don't want to do that. I mean, no one wants to do that, but these are negotiations that go on between agents and our organization, and it's over a lot of money and stuff. Those aren't just things that you just knock out right away. But I believe that we will. I hope that we do, and hopefully it won't come in any football stuff. Clearly,
a lot of coach speak in there. We will, we hope, we may, we might. Kyle, again, is never one to give away too much. He didn't look too stressed, which was good. We've seen a rather disheveled Kyle Shanahan at times where you're like, brother, just take a day off, please. But Kyle looks like he's prepared. He looks like he's healthy. I think that when you hear what he's saying, yes, I think it's a lot of good stuff. When it comes to, we don't want him to hold out, he doesn't want to hold out. Of course, nobody wants that. But when the tough gets going, things have to be done to get what you want, right? In any line of business. That's when you're working at Walmart, when you're working at a radio station, or you're working at the NFL level. Sometimes holding out, refusing to come into work gets you what you want. It may hurt somebody in the process, and that's the way things go. But, when you hear, but these are negotiations. This is the exact quote from Kyle Shanahan here. But these are negotiations that go on between agents and our organization. And it's over a lot of money and stuff. Those aren't things you just knock out right away. But I believe we will. Again, alluding to this may take a while. But also, knowing the reporting that's come out of San Francisco from Mike Silver, Diana Rossini, Schefter, everybody really involved, kind of the heavy hitters out there of reporters, we know San Francisco feels like they were burned by Brandon Ayuk. They lost that contract. They lost Nick Bosa's deal. They somewhat, lost Deebo Samuel's deal, hence why he's now gone. They want to win the negotiations with Brock Purdy. They have to win, in their eyes, this contract with Brock Purdy. If they don't win, if they don't get their way, they know they have leverage over him via the franchise tag for the next 2 years or so. They understand that although I don't think Mac Jones was brought in to be a bridge quarterback to get you back to Brock Purdy, I don't think Kyle views Mac Jones that way. I do think, like I told you before I went to Japan, there was some comfortability reasons as to why this move makes sense on the off chance Brock holds out or the off chance a deal can't get done. It's about making Kyle Shanahan comfortable with the backup quarterback position, in which he wasn't last year with Josh Dobbs and Brandon Allen, and we also learned that Kyle tried to trade for Mac Jones before he was moved to the Jaguars last year. So he's wanted him for a long time, but I don't think that really has anything to do with Brock Purdy per se. It's more about, let's sign Brock to a big deal, but we like Mac Jones a lot. Get a better backup quarterback in the room that Kyle actually trusts and likes and can actually run a system, although it has some drawbacks. And no, Joseph, I love you're in here saying this, but I don't think that Brock is the bridge to Mac Jones. I do think that San Francisco is willing to be and play in uncomfortable waters because they have Mac Jones, but I don't believe there is any kind of truth to the idea that Mac Jones becomes the starting quarterback on the San Francisco 49ers in the near future, barring a Brock Purdy holdout or an injury. But I love your enthusiasm for Mac Jones and maybe a little bit of the same for Kyle Shanahan. But maybe I'm reading too much into this, and I'm certainly open to believing that. But what Jed York said next was kind of eye-opening to me. And it kind of opened my eyes as to how they view Brock. They want to pay him, but you kind of have to have where your evaluation is. And Joseph, I see your comment here asking for a good number and guarantees. I will get to that in a second, but I do want to talk about Jed York for a second because, earlier he said he wasn't involved in negotiations. That is the biggest case of BS I've ever heard in my entire life because it's his money. It's his franchise. He owns the building. He owns the team. The Niners are Jed York's. He has to sign off on every single deal, whether it's Leonard Floyd or Siren Neal or Brock Purdy. Jed's signature has to be on that contract in some way. He has to give it a thumbs up in some way. Right now, he may care more about Brock Purdy than Siren Neal, which he should, but it's Jed's money. Is he not the reason as to why they are gutting the roster, per se? There's a reason as to why Greenlaw wasn't brought back, and Hufanga wasn't brought back, and Ward wasn't brought back, and Debo got traded, and they cut Floyd, and they cut Collins. Yeah, Jed is, and along with Prague, a big reason as to why this roster in the offseason has gone the way it's gone. So Jed saying, well, I'm not involved, I'm not really involved in contract negotiations. Bull! What? Yeah, right, dude. It's your money. Your money. Do not tell me, when my wife is like, hey, honey, do you want to get takeout tonight? Do you want to go out to eat? I'm like, no, this is our money. Let's protect it somewhat. Now, we can splurge here or there, but, when it's your money, when someone asks me for money, whether it's family or friends or I have to pay bills, I'm like, I know every single penny that comes out of my account. I check my bank account every day. Is the money still there? And I get it. I'm not a millionaire. I don't own San Francisco and the Niners and all that stuff, and I don't own Leeds, but you cannot tell me Jed's saying, I'm not in negotiations. Brother, you don't have to lie, because we all know you are. It's okay, Jed. We get it. It's your money. You're involved in negotiations. You are a large factor as to why this roster on defense has been gutted. There's a reason as to why, you're the one that signs off on contracts, because it's your money, your franchise. You're the owner. So yes, Jed, in some way, while you aren't in there on day-to-day stuff, they had to come to you to say, hey, Jed, we want to pay for Brock Purdy and go up and get Trey Lance too. You had to agree to that. You don't care about the contract stuff? I mean, come on, dude. Come on. But I do think we got an indication as to where this team, at least Jed York, which, like Joseph says here, he's a bad talker. He's terrible at talking. He just says stuff and you're like, I don't know what you meant by that, but it sounded stupid. And I like Jed York. I think he's cleaned up his act, post the Jim Harbaugh stuff, took a back seat, let Kyle and John take over, and has kind of changed his image in a good way. That said, sometimes when he's asked to talk, and let me be clear here, he was very adamant and has been that they are going to pay Brock Purdy, that they want to pay Brock Purdy. They want Brock to be in San Francisco for a very, very long time. All that's true. I got it. Cool. That said, he was asked today, is Brock Purdy a top 10 quarterback? And I tell you this, maybe I'm reading too much into this. He threw the biggest bucket of shade, I think, on Brock Purdy you could, unintentionally. And it was like, oh, okay. I don't know if you slipped. I don't know if this was an accident, or maybe you really didn't think the words that you said were going to be read into this much, but he said this. I think Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback. I think he's great. Okay, so far, not a bad start. You like him, you think he's great, you think he's top 10. Then he says this, especially when you combine Brock Purdy with Kyle Shanahan and you combine him with what we have. He's a heck of a quarterback. We want him to be here for a long time. You started so great and you ended so great. But right in the middle, the meat of the sandwich, you had your bread, your mustard, your mayonnaise, your lettuce, your tomato, maybe a pepperoni, maybe a pickle. But right in the middle, the meat of your statement, especially when you have Kyle Shanahan and you pair him and you combine him with the offense we have, it's like, Jed, you're not even wrong in what you're saying, brother. But like, it comes across in a way where you may say Brock's top 10 quarterback, but the way you word this makes it sound like you think he's a top 10 quarterback because of Kyle Shanahan, because of Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk and Pierce on the weapons you have. A lot of this sounds like, yeah, Brock's a top 10 guy, especially because Kyle Shanahan and the offense around him, which, again, to get into my, X-Files, conspiracy theory here, I think that tells you kind of where they view Brock. Unintentionally, I think this is Jed York kind of slipping of like, yeah, we like Brock a lot. He's a great quarterback, top 10 guy. We also love Kyle and the offense around him too. Now, I think Brock Purdy is a really good quarterback. I think Brock deserves to get paid, done more than enough to get paid. He's a boring guy that you want to have lead your franchise. He's a good dude, respectful person and player. He's a gamer. He's a grinder. He'll be in this thing to the end. I feel like that, Jed kind of put his foot in his mouth here, again, unintentionally. And I don't think he meant this to slight Brock at all, but it comes across that way. But I think it does give you insight into maybe the conversations happening behind the scenes. Well, Brock's great and all, but Kyle also is there, and it really helps him a lot, which is true. And I don't exactly know what that number is for Brock. You can talk about annually and stuff. You can go into the quarterback salaries and this, that, and the other. I really don't know what Brock gets. I think San Francisco would probably want to make Brock's probably a 3 or 4 year deal at the most. I don't think they want to go 5 years. I don't think that makes sense for a quarterback of Brock Purdy's status and stature. Not literally, but in some ways, literally. He's had some injuries the last couple of years, although I don't think they're that big of a deal. I know Benali P asks, is Brock injury prone? I don't. I just think when you have quarterbacks that are, smaller and they run around and everything like that, you're going to get hurt. Brock is unafraid to take hits, hence why you'd want a better pass protecting center, not named Jake Brendel, to avoid some of those hits, which doesn't feel like that's the case. That said, for Brock, if you want to talk about kind of the annual value, I think a lot of it, really should be based on the Jalen Hurts contract, where it's a high enough money. Let's say Brock wants it kind of adjusted for inflation, which Hurts right now is getting $51 million per year, which I know per year really isn't the best value to go off of. But $51 million per year, I think Brock will probably get roughly 53, maybe at the high end 55, but I don't think he'll get over that. I think San Francisco wants to keep that money down. So let's say, theoretically here, let's say Brock gets like 4 years. What is that? 4 years and like 220? Is that what that is? 4 years, 220, maybe like 4 years, 215, with, let's say, guaranteed wise, I don't know, like 120 guaranteed. I think they want to tie themselves to Brock Purdy, which again, it's confusing because Kyle and John were like, we're going to be here as long as Brock's here. And it's like, okay, if you do that, that means you want to have him for like, 10 years or so, which maybe they do, but don't play fickle then with your quarterback, right? But I think like a 4-year deal for like $212 million can make a lot of sense for them. It'd be around $53 million, kind of closer to what Jared Goff is currently getting with the Lions. I think that Dak Prescott's contract really isn't something that San Francisco wants to do. I don't think they love what Lawrence and Burrow got per year. I don't have the guarantees in front of me currently, but I'll pull them up as we speak to kind of give you a better answer, Joseph, into what you were asking earlier, if I can. Let's see if I can pull those up really fast for you. I think that if you look at what Prescott got, $240 overall, getting $60 million per year. Again, I think Brock falls in that 212, 215 range, probably at the high end in regards to like total money to get the average annual value around 53, 55. But my phone's being slow, so I apologize when it comes to guaranteed contracts and whatnot. But if you look at like total guarantees, if you're getting into that, like Prescott got 231. There's no way Brock's getting that. Hurts got 180 almost. I think if anything, Purdy's probably around Jordan Love range, 160. Maybe you go Kyler, kind of that range, which would put Brock just inside or outside the top 10 in guarantees and give him like top 10 money. So I think Hurts' contract is kind of the best, I guess you could say, makeup or kind of archetype to build off of. There's kind of easy ins and outs of that deal. There's like roster bonuses, and there's like ways San Francisco can adjust the cap, maneuver the cap, and also restructure that deal along the way, which I think kind of gives them what they want. I think, and this is the big thing here, and this is where I want to end. When San Francisco talks about winning contracts, they want financial flexibility within the contract to get out of it, to make moves within it. Kittle's deal did that. Warner's deal did that. Armstead's deal did that till the end. Juszczyk's deal, although smaller, did that. Deebo Samuel's deal did not do that. Ayuk's deal only did that early in the deal, but he got hurt and it complicated things, hence why he might get traded next offseason. So I think a really financially flexible deal like Jalen Hurts' contract, you get Brock about $53 million per year on a 4-year deal, gives you a quicker out if things go awry, but also can lock him in at a cheaper rate than what Goff is getting currently or what Lawrence or Prescott got. I have a hard time believing we're going to see a quarterback get Dak Prescott money. It's Jerry Jones. He's an idiot. I mean, he's just a dumb dude. That said, I think Brock's deal should emulate Jalen Hurts' contract. And yes, Joseph, I do see Kyle and John being here 10 years, but a lot of that hinges on what Brock Purdy does in San Francisco. Hence why winning the deal is a massive sticking point for this regime. But tell me down below in the comments, what do you think Brock Purdy should get? What did you make of Jed York's comments regarding Brock Purdy's, especially with Kyle Shanahan and the offense they have around him? Do you understand why fans were mad at San Francisco for how they handled Dre Greenlaw's contract? And do you agree with Kyle Shanahan on the future of Jake Moody and Jake Brendel? Tell me all that down below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Give us that 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. You can use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com and get yourself a can of goat fuel down below in the description to save yourself 10% off. Again, like, share, subscribe, put your comments down below, and as always, my name is Sterling Bennett, and until next time, stay faithful.